Welcome to the Emotional Eating Unwrapped podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, an emotional eating and weight loss coach for women looking to fall in love with eating, create healthy attachments with food, and lose weight sustainably. Hello, and welcome to today's new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today's episode is for the woman who has it all together on paper. Okay, you're the one that people go to when they need advice. You're the one who holds everyone else together. You're the one who holds people's emotions, their feelings. You keep the calendar moving. You keep the kids fed. You keep the Excel spreadsheet going. You keep your teams inspired, right? You're the one, you're the generator, right? You're the glue. Okay, you show up, you follow through, you remember the birthdays, you send the birthday cards, you send the flowers, you make the call, you remember the milestones of other people. You smile when you're supposed to. Even when something inside of you feels like it's unraveling, you still push on through, right? You are the one that pushes through anyway. And so if you've ever, if you are a woman with a high functioning job and you have like a boardroom style career, and you are the person who literally has all their crap together in the boardroom, but then you come home and you're standing at the fridge in the dark at night, right? Like you just feel like you have no power over food, right? There's just a heaviness that comes over you. If you've ever been praised for like being so strong, being so capable, while leaving that scenario and secretly binging in your car before heading home for the night, right? If you've ever wondered how you can be so capable and feel so out of control with food, this conversation that we're going to have today is for you. Because this is the reality that so many high achieving, high functioning women are living these days, right? Outward success, inner struggle, a double life, and just a continuous chasm and gap that's building between the two. And the thread is starting to get really, really thin. Okay? These are so many women that I work with. This is their reality. This is their reality. And the thing is that ever since, women's liberation and all that, which is so amazing, right? It's so great. There's so many more opportunities for women. I for sure wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I grew up in the 20s, right? 1920s, right? I guess it's the 20s again, but the 1920s, right? And so we're conditioned to admire high functioning women, right? We're conditioned to put on a pedestal and revere women who seem like they have 28 hours in a day, who don't complain, who over deliver, who say yes, who mind read, right? Who could think 4 steps ahead, who perform emotional labor without needing credit, who's everyone's coach, right? Who's everyone's life coach, always has the best advice, right? Who lead, serve, support with a smile, even when they're cutting themselves off from themselves, even when they feel like they're drowning underneath, right? It's so funny because I remember in my own journey, in my own life, when I was struggling the most, I was giving the most advice, right? Like when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I also was like everyone's life coach, okay? To the point that I stopped, there was a point where I stopped counseling I've been counseling since 2005. I stopped counseling for 2 years because of how inauthentic giving people advice was when I was struggling myself. Now, my advice was always really good. And something that I always used to tell my friends was like, everyone else's life improved with my counsel, but my life was still so dark and so stuck because there was this incongruency, and I needed to take the time to heal my own stuff before I was able to authentically and integratedly give advice without it creating a wider depletion in my own identity and my own nervous system. Because so often the women who appear the most put together, and I always just say this too, like if anybody saw me on the outside, they would never have known. And no one really did. And I remember when I came out publicly, quote unquote, with my eating disorder, only really like my close friends obviously knew and people in my life knew, but people in this world knew. But like other people, from where I grew up and things like that, and from high school and people that I lost touch with, even some family members of mine, I wrote this, I was interviewed for a magazine, probably a little bit before COVID. So like 2018, 2019, where I talked about my struggle with my eating disorder. And I remember when that came out, I got flooded with messages from people that had no idea. They were like, oh my God, I thought you like had a perfect life, right? Like you were the soloist in all the shows and all the choirs. You got every lead in the play. You did well in school. You were attractive and, look, you're like appearance wise, like why would I, like you were thin, all these things. But oftentimes like that, the ones who seem the most put together are the ones who are in secret, are binging. And something that I had to heal about myself was realizing it's not because I'm weak, right? And you're not weak. If this is you right now, it's because we're tired. And food is the one space where you're not performing. And you and I both know that there's like, just like with binging, right? There's like a 5-second moment where it feels like good, right? Whatever that is. It's like when you give someone the advice and they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. That's great. You get that dopamine hit of like, I'm amazing. But then why later are you back, binging? Right. I mean, I lived like a decade like that. So I totally understand that. But that's the reality. And if you're listening to this, you might even not really identify as someone who struggles, quote unquote, with food, or you haven't quite like accepted that potentially yet, but you're intrigued by some of the things that we talk about here. And maybe you've just entered my world or whatever. And some of it feels like you resonate, but you might not even identify as someone who struggles with food because your success, your competence, your capability, your image feels so far from the label. So there's like this separation, right? And I feel like, but the truth. And honestly, it's like admitting it is like the first step to healing. So if you are listening to this and you are someone who hasn't yet quite accepted it, just know that there's a freedom that comes with this admission and this acceptance, right? Because you know the truth. You know what happens when the lights are off, when no one's watching, when the pressure lifts just long enough, right, to feel the edge of what you've been suppressing. And that's not just emotional overeating and binging, it's emotional survival, right? It's like a repletion of the depletion. Because let's be clear, right? The binge, it's not random. It's a sign, right? It's not a sign of of failure or anything about your character. It's a signal, right? It's the place where everything you've been holding on to gets to let go, right? It's the anger you don't express. It's the exhaustion that you don't let yourself feel or admit to. It's the softness that you don't allow, right? It's like holding everybody at arm's length, not letting anybody in, sarcasm, like, right? Like, I don't need anything from anyone, right? It's the loneliness that you don't name. Food becomes that release valve. Food becomes that release valve because when you spend your day and your emotional and energetic currency micromanaging everyone else's expectations, their emotions, their perception of you, at some point, something inside you is going to need a relief. And food, especially in secret, offers that momentary escape. Right? That's why binging is different than just mindless eating. You know, there's an energy to binging because we're looking for something more out of that experience than just food. Okay, binging, it becomes this quiet rebellion, right? Your dissociation, your pause, because you don't feel permission to have it. But afterwards, right? Like I said before, it's like really, really short-lived, like super short-lived, right? Like I think 5 minutes max, right? Afterwards, the shame, the guilt, this dissonance that starts to develop between the woman that you are in public and the one you feel like in private. And that disconnect becomes its own source of suffering, especially in relationships with other humans. I had such a hard time developing intimate relationships with people when I was in this space of my eating issues and, you know, my eating disorder and things like that and struggle. Right? I couldn't create healthy intimacy. And I'm not talking about physical intimacy. I'm talking about emotional intimacy, right? Because the dissonance, I always came up hard on the dissonance. Right? It always showed its face in those moments right before the intimacy was going to develop. Just couldn't do it until I healed. Until I healed. And one of the most heartbreaking things that I hear from women in the mentorship is, which I think is like the hardest part. And obviously, once they are in the mentorship, they've overcome this. But, you know, they didn't want to tell anybody or ask for help because they felt like they should know better, right? They didn't feel like this should be true for them. And I totally get it because high functioning, high achieving women that have a perception to society to be a certain way where people project their perceptions onto you because of certain qualities that you have, right? We're praised for being independent. You're rewarded for not needing too much, right? It's seen as something that's a good quality. You've built an identity on being fine, right? I'm fine. You built an identity on being capable, being strong, but there's like a hardness to you. There's a wall. I remember what it felt like to be stuck in the cycle of emotional eating. I tried every diet out there, counting, tracking, restricting, but nothing ever worked. Food controlled my life, my thoughts, and I constantly felt guilty after eating. But once I learned how to heal the emotional triggers behind my eating and trust my body, everything changed. I stopped obsessing over food, the weight started coming off naturally, and I found real freedom in how I ate and lived. So I created the Sober Eating year-long mentorship to help other women experience the same transformation. So you can stop battling with food, you can lose weight without deprivation, and you can feel confident in your body again. In this mentorship, you'll have access to my proven nervous system rewiring method. You'll have access to live coaching with me, weekly accountability, and a community of women who truly understand your journey. You'll also have free access to my signature programs, the Emotional Eating Solution and Decoding Permanent Weight Loss, valued at $2,000. Click the link in the show notes to explore the mentorship today. You don't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you every step of the way. And so when food becomes something that you feel powerless to, or that you feel like you can't control, somewhere deep down, asking for help or investing in support, or, even just sharing what's going on with people, that could be hard. One, because like I said, intimacy and that sense of feeling worthy and connected to yourself enough to feel safe asking for that support can be challenging. But ultimately, because of this identity, just the act of asking for help can feel like a betrayal to your identity. Right? And even more, you might fear being seen as dramatic, needy, or too sensitive. It's possible. And I know I did this. You might even judge other women who as that. And so you don't want to be that. They are not that. But, that might be something that you are, they're not dramatic. They're not needy. They're not too sensitive. Right? But all of these objections and blockages is because you don't want to feel like a fraud to your own self-identity. So you keep it quiet. But what happens is the quiet becomes secrecy. And the secrecy, which feels maybe in the beginning like a reprieve, I know it did for me, eventually feels like shame, right? And feels like that's like this is the fraud, which keeps the cycle going, right? But here's what I want to hear. So if you're at the place now where you're just starting to recognize this, the idea that we sometimes have about people that ask for help, that they're like dramatic or needy or just like a disaster, it's not right. That's not the right, that isn't true. Right? I learned this. And now at the first, at like the beginning stages of something that feels off to me, or that feels like, I can use some support, not saying I need someone to do something for me, but like emotionally or help to help me feel better. I ask, right? Because like I deserve that. And I'm also there for other people too, right? I don't wait until I fall apart. Like you don't have to wait until you fall apart publicly or till you hit rock bottom, right? You don't have to hide the most human parts of you just to maintain an image. To be honest, a lot of times when we get help, when we've hit rock bottom or we fall apart, we're not connected to our center. And actually, we could show up as extreme versions of ourselves on the other side. So this is the best place to start asking for help, when you start to see this, when you start to see this dissonance, this disconnect, this gap. And you start to see that it's something that isn't working for you, that isn't healthy. Because the antidote to binging is not more discipline. It's not more rules. Okay? It's not even so much about food. It's not even about hunger and fullness cues. That's why it's like it's important to understand that, to learn how to nourish your body and eat with integrity. But when it comes to binging, like I said, it's a different energy. There's a different motivation behind the binge. And a lot of times it's because we're living in a dishonest way to our soul. And our soul knows. So the antidote to secret binging isn't more rules or more discipline, it's more honesty. It's giving yourself permission to live out loud, to say, I'm struggling, even if everything else looks perfect, right? You could be capable and be struggling at the same time in different sections of your life. Okay, you could be badass in one area and then an hour later be struggling, right? It's giving yourself permission to be known, to be seen, not just in your perception or your presentation to the world, your highlight reel, but in your humanity, in your complexity. Because I'll tell you right now, the minute that you learn how to have that relationship with yourself, and then you learn how to create that relationship with other people and that intimacy, so you create the intimacy with yourself and the intimacy with with people, food loses its grip. Not all at once, but gradually. Because the pressure to be perfect, it starts to dissolve. And with it, the need to control food, to binge, to like have this contentious relationship with food and put so much emotional energy into eating and food in order to cope, it starts to go away. Because healing and getting support doesn't mean that you're losing strength, right? It means that you're just redefining strength. I think the strongest people can be real and be raw and ask for support, because strength truly is not keeping it all together. That's like an old paradigm. It's letting yourself be real in a mature and responsible way. So like I said before, a lot of times when we wait to get help, when we've like fallen completely apart or we hit rock bottom, it's hard to be mature and responsible. And it's not your fault. It's just like it's like we've gone too far. That's just where we're at, right? And I feel like sometimes women only give themselves permission to ask for help when they're like a puddle on the floor. But you don't have to be a puddle. Because if you think about puddles, what happens to puddles, right? It goes everywhere. It's totally like it has no form. And you need form to heal. Okay, you need form to heal. Puddles have none. Okay, so being strong is willing to see when you're starting to soften and it's starting to like, and that's fine. And keep that soft form, right? Like that's great, right? You let yourself be real. And when you start to show up as your full self, right? Like messy, you're complex. You could be brilliant at this thing, right? You could be not so great at this thing. Something amazing starts to happen. You start to feel safe, right? Food and getting some imaginary control over food is never going to make you feel safe if you don't feel safe being a real person. And you don't know, and you don't have you're not sure, and you don't have the skills to interact with yourself or others as a real person, right? There's skills to this, right? And this is some of the skills I teach in the mentorship, right? There's skills to in intradependent and interdependent relationship, okay? Because that's where safety comes from. It's the confidence that you're still all the capable, amazing, put together things, and also you can be someone who struggles. And when you start to recognize that, and then you start to build awareness around those things and heal those things, everything else becomes so much easier. Everything else becomes easy, including weight loss, if that's a goal for you. Okay, so if you have been living in this split reality, publicly composed, privately hurting, I want you to know, I hope you know this. You're not alone. I've shared my story. It's the story of just about every woman, like majority of women that I've worked with, that I continue to work with. You're not broken. You're not failing. Right? You're just, whether or not you've acknowledged it to yourself or not, you are just tired. Right? You're like spiritually, emotionally, energetically tired of being everything to everyone while your own needs get buried under the image you've been taught to maintain. Like, and actually is an image you might enjoy as well, right? Like there's a part of that image that you might enjoy, which is totally great. You could be both, right? You could be integrated, right? You don't have to live in a divide. You could integrate, right? And you're allowed to integrate. But to do that, you have to be seen by yourself. You have to be willing to be seen and known by yourself, right? Like not by yourself, but by you, by your own self. Right? You need to get the support, right? You're allowed to heal in plain sight. You're allowed to be an evolving human. Right? You don't have to heal in shadows, okay? Because the version of you that you imagine, that healed version that you see her, right? And if you don't see her, that's one of the first steps. We need to see her. She's not waiting on the other side of some perfection, of some, eating plan, right? Of some magic program or food plan or something, right? She's waiting on the other side of permission from you to be both. Okay? So that's all I have for you today. I really love this episode. Such an important one, really one that's close to my heart. So if you're listening to this and you have anything you want to share with us, please leave us a comment. You can leave us a comment on Spotify, on YouTube. We are on all podcast streaming platforms, Apple and Spotify. So maybe that's not all, but Apple and Spotify. And if you are watching on YouTube, all of our episodes are video. So if you're more of a video person, you can watch us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe there. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you so much for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.